and welcome to Farm Journal Live. I'm editor Clinton Griffiths at our Indiana studios here in northern Indiana as we continue bringing you the latest on the coronavirus outbreak and its impact to agriculture. Some breaking news today, the National Daily Box Beef Cutout showing choice cutouts at $307.75. That is a new all-time record. It tops the $300 mark for the very first time. Now, roughly 40% of hog production capacity now idled in Iowa as more hog facilities go offline. Smithfield Foods announcing the closure of its Monmouth, Illinois facility late last week, and until further notice, that's after a small portion of its 1,700 employees tested positive for the virus. Meanwhile, cars were spotted rolling into parking lot of the Tyson Pork Production Plant in Waterloo, Iowa. That plant shut down. Employees now waiting in long lines to take a company-provided test for COVID-19. The shutdown after positive COVID tests of employees had reached the 182 mark. Tyson now is paying employees while the plant is closed. And if you're hoping to be part of the Paycheck Protection Program, experts say it's a good idea to get that application in as soon as possible. It's designed to help small businesses with fewer than 500 people, which could include farmers and ranchers. Congress approving more funds for several loan programs that could help those folks. Ag producers also eligible for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, or EIDL. We've got Chris Voigt with the National Potato Council. He joins us now. And Chris, while we talk a lot about the protein sector, that's not the only sector out there that's facing some challenges. Potatoes especially, a real challenge for you folks.
Yeah, about 95% of French fry sales, for example, happen in restaurants. So when you get that protein, that chicken sandwich or that cheeseburger, you're getting fries with it. Well, with the closure of the restaurants, all of a sudden we've lost 95%. Of those businesses. I mean, there's still some drive-through activity happening, but we're seeing essentially a loss of roughly about 70% of restaurant sales at this point. So that's a huge impact. So I'm actually located in Washington State, and about 90% of what we grow are processed potato products like French fries or tater tots, hash brown patties. Now, when you close that many restaurants in the country because of the COVID virus restrictions, huge implications. So now, essentially, sales have stopped. We're no longer delivering a lot of potatoes to the potato processors, and it's really creating a backup in the pipeline of the supply system.
As we talk about the potatoes in storage, the numbers are kind of staggering, the amount of potatoes that we're sitting on and haven't sold.
Yeah, it's pretty typical. About the 1st of April, the USDA reports that in Washington State, we have roughly about 3 billion pounds of potatoes in storage, which is very common, and we'll continue to deliver those potatoes, and they usually get used up by the processors by July 4th. And that's when the new crop comes on. Well, right now, we estimate that we're going to have anywhere between 1 and 1.5 billion pounds of potatoes that aren't going to be used by the processors before the new crop comes on. So it's got a devastating impact right now. And how do you even get rid of 1.5 billion pounds of potatoes? I mean, that's a real challenge.
We've talked about giving some of this produce to food banks and folks that need it, but it's hard to give away 1 billion to 1.5 billion pounds of produce, or of potatoes, excuse me.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, ultimately, it would be great if someone could buy the potatoes. I mean, because, our growers are still paying off the loan that they took out to grow these potatoes. But, everybody's doing their part. We're trying to make as many donations as we can. But the reality is, I mean, every man, woman, and child that visits a food bank in Washington State's going to have to take 500 pounds of potatoes between now and July 4th.
Oh my gosh.
Is that even possible? That's 20,000 semi-trucks to move 1 billion pounds of potatoes. How are we even going to get those loaded? I mean, it is some real logistical challenges, not only financially to take that sacrifice by donating that much and not being able to pay off your loan, but just the logistical challenges of trucking and washing and packing and delivery. It's a big issue we have.
Huge issue. And Chris, obviously it's getting to be planting time. How are farmers thinking about the potato crop for this next year, given the challenges right now?
Yeah, right at the end of March, all the potato processors called the growers and said, stop, park your planter, because this is getting out of control. We're losing so many sales. We don't know, and that's the challenge of everybody in the produce industry is we don't know what the demand supply curve even looks like anymore. We're having to reinvent it. I mean, it used to be you could almost set your watch to how many potatoes this country was going to need every week of the year, but that's all thrown out the window. So we don't even know how much to plant. And so, unfortunately, a lot of our growers had actually already finished planting their entire crop of what they were told to. And now the processors have come back and cut anywhere from 10 to 100% some of these growers. So devastating impact to our farmers.
You know, Chris, I know a lot of times on the grain side of things, we talk a lot about prices and the impacted demand. How has this impacted prices for potatoes?
Well, most of like what we grow is on process, so it's done on a contract basis. So that is pretty level. The question mark is will the processors even take them at some point? They're saying, well, we'll take them, but it might take us, we won't probably get to it till July 4th like we were planning on. We might get into September or October, and will the potatoes last that long? That's the big question. So we haven't necessarily been impacted because of the contracts, but our fresh market, when the hoarding was going on, they were doing great. We couldn't even keep up with demand. But now that everybody bought their 100 pounds of potatoes and are storing them in the garage, sales have slowed down quite a bit.
All right, Chris Voigt with the National Potato Council. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us some perspective there. A couple other stories here to get to real quick. A bit of international news. A second massive swarm of desert locusts, even bigger than the first, now threatening eastern Africa. UN officials are warning the lockdown due to the coronavirus and making the situation even more dire. Millions and millions of desert locusts in one swarm moving across the region up to 80 miles a day, eating everything in their path. The UN says global shutdowns are delaying some critical pesticide shipments, and many of their field experts are under lockdown. They warn that the next wave could be catastrophic. 20 million people in East Africa face the possibility of food insecurity because of these locusts. And at 4 Eastern today, USDA will roll out its latest planting progress numbers for the nation. A lot of field work happened last week. Farmers hoping to keep rains at bay this week as they hit things hard. Corn, 7% planted last week, soybeans 2%. It's been a mixed day for markets. However, corn remains under pressure here. Dan Bosse with the Ag Resource Company joining us now. And Dan, as we look at these commodity markets, that seems to be a real challenge of how we find any kind of sunlight out there in these markets.
It really is. You come to work on Monday and it's another day of the same. It's again, as we see the corn and soybean and wheat markets softening, maybe a little different fundamentals behind it in terms of what's going on in wheat today. But other than that, we're still talking about this dramatic drop in ethanol demand. We dropped our corn ethanol demand at Ag Resource down to 4.5 billion bushels. That's 500 million bushels below the USDA for old crops because Americans are still not engaging in driving.
Yeah, as we put in this crop and do some planning here, do you see any impacts here or ripples as we go forward?
Well, the ripples are very sizable. We need Washington to step forward, probably with more aid. We're thinking another aid package of $35 to $50 billion on top of the $19 billion that was announced last week. Every sector of agriculture is struggling. The corn farmer is probably looking at lower prices going forward. We were heartened to see that 70% of U.S. corn farmers did take the PLC option, which gives them kind of a free put going down, which will help longer term, but it's not immediate for today.
You know, Dan, the futures prices on corn somewhere in that 306, 307 range before we started here. That's pretty low price, especially if you start to look at some of the basis impacts around, especially the Western Corn Belt.
You're really right. And I'm still struggling on new crops. There's some elevators and big commercial firms that will buy percentages. They want, if you were to offer them 100,000 bushels, they may buy 25 or 30. So everybody's being very tentative because of the uncertainty that we see. We don't know how long this will last. We suspect it's going to be through the middle of June, but nonetheless, the farmers dealing with markets anyway that are far less certain and less predictable going forward.
Dan, let's talk about this protein sector a little bit, because obviously some stress because of the plant shutdowns and slowdowns that are happening across the country. How hard is it going to be to climb our way out of where market prices are now?
Well, it's going to be pretty difficult. Our estimates within Ag Resource is that there's about 400,000 head of cattle that will not get slaughtered during the month of April. That's a big backup. That's the biggest backup we can find. So already we were first increasing in May and June. Now we put that on top of it at higher carcass weights. we feel the cattle market we see the cattle packer is about 67% operation today. And then we turn to the pork side of things. We hate to say this, but we think as many as 1 million hogs could be euthanized because there's just no place for them to go. We need to keep the hotel rotation moving on. So when we think about that pork sector, we should be killing at this time of the year 2.55 million head. We're not even close to that. We'll luckily to do this week 195 or 2 billion. So there we're backing up maybe 450 to 500,000 head of hogs a week.
Some of the reason that we have so many hogs in this country is we were preparing for massive demand from China as they had their issues with African swine fever. Is that still a possibility, or is it just simply because we can't get in these processors and get that job done?
So I want to be clear, the problem at processors is not getting the animals dead, it's getting the animals fabricated. And so, you think back to 2001 when a lot of big chain stores moved their butchers to what I call case-ready products. Some of the big Walmarts and all those kind of things. This puts all that pressure and fabrication at plants. We can get the animals dead. And why I bring this up is because China is a little different. It takes split hog carcasses, just cut them in half, freeze them, and send them over. In the case of beef, we're cutting them in thirds and then sending them over, and they fabricate over there. I do believe that the U.S. consumer, as you mentioned earlier, will see higher prices, and there will be shortages of beef and pork and poultry at the meat case in coming weeks.
Well, it is a changing dynamic. As we start to look beyond the next couple of months, what does the rest of 2020 look like for you, Dan? I know that's a big question as we try to work our way through this issue.
Well, if you could help me out, if we find a therapeutic or a vaccine, that would be great, Clint. But as I look forward, I do think this summer will be better. And in the livestock markets, because of the diminished placement rate of cattle and hogs, we will see some bullishness in Q4 for 2020, which likely carries into 2021. On the grain side of things, I'm afraid the ethanol plants are now closed until, let's call it September. So we've lost 4 months of ethanol demand. It's that component of meat and ethanol that really is the key here to understanding agriculture going forward.
Dan Bossie with the Ag Resource Company. Thank you so much, Dan, for giving us some perspective there as we try to work through what this coronavirus means for the industry of agriculture and, of course, all of us as we go about our daily lives. If you'd like to keep up with the latest, you can join us at agweb.com/coronavirus for our very latest in coverage. From everyone at Farm Journal, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.
This season, rather than madness, opening days, or taking a break, the world is frozen, silenced by quarantines, isolated by distance, and edging on panic. But while work for you may have changed, out here, we're still going strong. Our season is underway. The crops will get planted, the livestock will be fed, and your food will continue to be grown. Just like it's been for generations. There's plenty to worry about. But out here, social distancing is our specialty. American agriculture farms on, today and tomorrow, for our family and yours.